All right, and we are live. Welcome everybody. We are talking today about speaker trim rings, and it's going to go a little bit beyond that. That's probably not the best title. It's more like adapter plates for mounting electronics when you have issues with the new electronics or speaker not fitting in your existing hole cutout. So,
right.
Yeah, Matt, you want to kind of show me what we've got right here?
Yeah,
and chat about the different applications and things that you might need to use that for?
Absolutely. So I mean, the speaker trim rings are they're kind of self-explanatory, but the main reason why you run into needing them are, one, you're getting a different size speaker, and maybe you're going smaller and you need to cover the area from the old cutout, or two, maybe your new speaker is deeper than the last speaker that you got. It mounts deeper, and you need to get some space off the mounting surface so that when you put the speaker in, it'll mount up flush, nice, clean, and get good sound. We have a page on the website where you can go and put in the dimensions for the outside diameter and the inside diameter of the speaker trim ring so that you can get the appropriate dimensions for what you need right off the bat without even having to call in.
And we say speakers, and of course, most speakers are circle, but we do a lot of these for radio trim plates as well, right?
Absolutely.
What's some of the last couple projects you've done? Can you think of an example?
Yeah, you run into it a lot with switching out VHFs, or actually switching from like a double DIN radio to a single DIN, or or maybe you're going to one of the round, like Bluetooth supported, gauge style radios, and you had a long rectangular one before where you can get a plate with the cutout in the middle of it that'll match the diameter of the radio that you're mounting in there.
So, I mean, one of the important takeaways then is that shape really is not important so much as you're taking and you are designing an outside shape, right, to cover your existing hole cutout and to give you room to mount it, and to cover any schmutz or anything that's left over where it's discolored.
Leftover mounting holes, discolored fiberglass, like you said, exactly.
And then we're able to put whatever size or shape cutout on the inside of that to be able to make it a 1-for-1. It's really like an adapter plate. It's probably a more appropriate title would be adapter. But then in addition to that, we have these circles, right? Of course, it doesn't have to be a circle; it could be a rectangle or a square. And these are more like a shim, right?
Right.
So talk about some of the applications where someone would need some kind of a a shim or some kind of a mounting plate or backing plate.
Right. Some of the different ways that you're going to look at that is maybe you're mounting new electronics to the top of a dash, and you need to cover up a hole or like an old compass cutout, and you're mounting something there. Maybe for a transducer that you're mounting to the transom, you need something that you can space out there.
Maybe just a cover plate.
Or just a cover plate.
Take something out and you don't want to have a hole, and you wouldn't go.
You don't have anything to go back there, but you don't want what's there anymore.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that we do on occasion is do angled wedges. I actually have some pictures we'll flip back over and look at that, where we can actually take this and cut it, machine it at an angle. And a lot of times that's a big advantage. Like, for example, if it's going behind a screen, specifically the example I have, I'll show you. Actually, I'll flip back over. Let's look at it now.
Yeah.
So over here, this is a trim plate that was cut on an angle. In this specific screen, the angle that the dash was mounted at was just there was a bad glare, right? You couldn't see as you were standing there at the helm.
Right. You got a shorter console with a more vertical mounting style, so that, as you're standing up trying to run the boat, you got a real downward angle. You're trying to look at the screen, and you just can't see it as well.
So this is an example of something that we could do, right? So you're taking and we're doing it's not a donut. What is it? Just a trim ring, right?
I would call this an angled wedge, like a wedge plate, so that you can create an angle to kind of tilt the screens up towards you a little bit more.
And when you're doing that, one important thing to keep in mind is there are, of course, limits to the angle that we're able to get.
Right.
Because we do have to keep, correct me if I'm wrong, is that a 1/4 inch at the top?
We have to maintain a 1/4 inch at the thin side, but the thickest starboard we have is about 1 inch thick. So as you're going, depending upon the height that you're working with, the angle is going to be affected by that.
Right. And we do have 1.5 inch starboard, but we don't have it on the website. It's quite expensive, and we keep just a couple sheets of it. So typically when you need to do a small project, it becomes cost prohibitive. That little bit of extra angle is not worth the extra 1/2 inch of thickness on the bottom, but that's something that we would be happy to quote for you if you were interested, and that certainly does let it pitch back further.
Absolutely.
But you can see where something like this would be of mega value.
Oh, it's a huge advantage. Actually, a project that I did similar to this didn't angle the screen up. It was a big, wide console. I think it was on an Everglades 350, and the customer said the screen that was all the way on the right side from the drive station, he had a hard time seeing it, so he actually wanted to angle it back towards him. Yeah, so it was thicker on the right side than it was on the left, and created an angle, and he was thrilled with it.
Cool. Well, let's flip back through some other pictures that we have here. All different kinds of different shims, different mounting plates. Here's your windlass.
Yep. Just a new mounting plate to mount the windlass right down to the deck. Yeah, there you got your radar. It was a radar mounting plate, so the plate went right on top of the metal plate that was already there, so you could accommodate the footprint of the radar, the new radar that he switched out to. I think this is actually a backing plate that was used on the inside of the boat.
It looks like it.
So what you got?
Right?
Yeah, two here. You got your compass plate and you got your helm plate. So just helps clean it up, covers up whatever used to be there on a nice new dash. This is pretty cool. So looking at this photo, you can see it, and maybe you can point to it with your mouse, but there's actually 2 speaker trim rings used on each one of these speakers. Yeah, that picture shows it better. And you can see that it's really thin going up into this radar arch, so the customer really needed to get a good amount of depth. I think these are 2 3/4 inch thick speaker trim rings, so it added about 1.5 inches worth of space to the depth for the speakers to fit in there. And you'll see the 2 lower speakers were 7/7s, where as you go further up the radar arch, he went to 6.5s.
Very cool. It actually looks really nice.
It looks super clean.
Nice. You could see, do you remember working on this project, or did the customer just buy this on
I vaguely recall talking to someone about it. I don't remember if I placed the order or not.
I like what they did as far as making the one oversized.
Yes.
One of the issues is, trying to line it up perfectly, you're going to have some gappage.
Yeah,
it's better to offset it like that.
If you want to jump back over to the screen real quick, I'll try and, portray it. But if you see this, it doesn't matter. These are the same exact diameter. It doesn't matter how hard I try. You're going to see a line in between the two.
Hot. I don't know if
it's hard to see, but you can see the line there. You could try real hard, and if you hit the nail on the head, you really got it perfectly lined up. You're still going to see the seam.
It's almost better to accentuate the difference.
It's better to avoid trying to hide the seam and just acknowledge it. You can step it out a little bit more. So in this case, what we suggest doing with the speaker trim rings is making them bigger than the speaker that you're installing into them or onto them, so that you can put the round over on the edge of the speaker trim ring and have it look natural, where that round over comes up and stops where the speaker starts.
Okay, so that's a good point. That's worth taking a second and talking about. So you're advising when someone calls in, the first reaction might be, okay, I just want to match the outside of my speaker.
Right.
Right, and you could, but you're saying that it generally what you found is that it looks better to oversize it slightly so that you can radius the mounting plate.
Yes.
And make it look like it was factory installed that way versus
make it look like it's supposed to be there rather than something we tried to hide.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's good advice.
The only other reason why I would recommend that is a lot of the speakers, or a lot of the newer speakers that you see, they have like decorative angles trimmed. So maybe it's a beveled edge, or maybe it's not a perfect circle all the way around. It might come in, so you just don't want to. You don't want to try and hide something that might be noticeable because of that.
Right. You might see. That's a good point. So keeping going forward, here's just another
more speaker trim rings.
Trim ring.
That was a subwoofer plate.
Okay.
Yep.
Absolutely. So here you get into a radio.
Absolutely.
Plate.
A lot of the radio covers, a lot of the radios that are being made now are pretty water resistant. A lot of the Fusion radios can handle getting wet, so they don't necessarily need the old radio mounting like housings with the cover, the flip up cover, or the drop down cover, and those cutouts for those were really big. So when you're switching up from one of those old housings to like a new Fusion RA70 or something like that, you're going to have a bigger cutout than what you need, and that's what this plate really helps with.
Just the electronics being able to be made waterproof, you don't need as much housing around them, so they've all gotten smaller, so that makes sense. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. But there you go.
That's perfect. That's it. I can't tell which model that is, but it's close to what I was saying. Okay, so this is pretty cool. There's 2 things that you have going on here. You have an angled wedge at the bottom, and then you have just a piece of cut to size starboard on top to help build out thickness, so that when they were mounting this this crank, well, it wouldn't be crooked, but they also built out the thickness so that they could get it in better in line with the railing that the rope is running over. So it's not wrapping over it; it's actually just coming down and making contact around it.
One, so your crank doesn't hit the rail.
And so the crank doesn't hit the rail, exactly.
Huh.
So that's another crank, typical to what you'd find on a sailboat, and you can make out the white backing plate underneath it.
So this is interesting. So this is actually, it looks like this mounts in the gunnel of the boat. This is probably a situation where we do have another video we recommend checking out about what to do if you want to replace worn and cracking rod boxes. It's typically a very shallow area, so there's not a ton you can do with it. In this case, it looks like there was enough depth to be able to mount a couple speakers, and this is just a bigger cover plate that covers that existing rod box cutout, and he was able to mount 2 speakers in there. So I thought that was pretty clever. I hadn't seen that before we were prepping for the show.
Yeah, it was a cool project.
It's a good way to use the space if you don't need the extra rod storage.
Yeah.
And a lot of times
maybe you just don't fish. You got a center console, you don't fish, you like to go to the sandbar, you want a loud boat, you need a bunch of places to put some speakers. That's a good way to go.
So many rod holders in the back of the
Absolutely.
post. He might not need it, and it's not convenient rod storage really. And the issue a lot of times is rod boxes crack. And some of the manufacturers of the rod boxes aren't even necessarily in business anymore, or don't have the molds, so you're a little bit SOL trying to find that thing.
Finding the exact replacement is tough.
So it is a good option there if you can't figure out what to do otherwise.
Right.
Just another one.
So that's a real
one.
Thick speaker trim ring, yeah.
So this guy put some cork behind it. I don't know what the.
I think he was trying to create a seal. Just the way that he did it. He cut out some cork he probably had on hand, adhered it to the back, and screwed it down into the boat.
It's interesting. Turned out nice though.
See, here's an example of someone who was going from a much larger speaker down to a smaller speaker, which is why he had to go with such an oversized speaker trim ring in this case.
So I think let's flip back over and we'll talk about, talk real quick about the material that's used, right? So the majority of what we sell when we are selling these adapter plates is Starboard.
Absolutely.
We talk about Starboard a lot. Starboard, super multifunctional, relatively affordable, for a boat anyway. And very easy to use and work with. One of the negatives with it is it can't be glued. And that's why this picture is a good example. You do need to mechanically fasten this to be able to have it stay holding against the fiberglass. Now, if that is a deal breaker for you and you really want to hide your fasteners, one of your options are to go to acrylic, and we can quote acrylic adapter plates for you. That's not a problem at all. It is a lot more expensive. The material is
drastically
2.5, 3 times more expensive, and there's a lot more labor. This edge, which you can't see very good because it's a little bit hot, but it looks really nice. It's really clean right off our CNC router, whereas acrylic is more expensive and has to be hand polished to get that high gloss finish on the edge.
Right.
So acrylic is more expensive and is, I wouldn't say it's as, in this context, it's as easy to work with, right? Because you're not machining it. We're sending you a finished part that you're gluing in place.
I would say yes and no to that. There are 2 reasons. One, the Starboard is much easier to work with on the user end, but we do offer acrylic drill bits, so when you go to make your mounting holes,
that's true. You do have to tap into the acrylic.
And
so
it's brittle. It'll break if you try to use a regular drill bit. A lot of times what will happen is as you start to drill through acrylic, you'll go in just fine, and as you get to the end, you're about to punch through, that drill bit's going to bite and it's going to blow out the acrylic on the backside. And it in small pieces like this, it can be catastrophic for the part.
Sure. So let's flip back over and we will, actually let's see, we got a question. Chris, can you make a tapered ring to angle a speaker on a flat surface?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Chris. We talked about that a little bit. We do a lot of that, and specifically, more often it's when there's a screen involved because you really want to pitch the screen up so that you're not getting the glare on that. In fact, we were talking about your customer that you were doing on probably a triple display?
There were 3 screens, and the one on the far right side he needed to angle back towards him a little bit so that he could get a better viewing angle on the screen.
And there are limits, of course, based off the thickness, because you do need to leave a 1/4 inch on the thin side. So typically, assuming you're using 1/2 inch, which is our standard materials, you're only pitching that 3/4 of an inch. and the size affects how much that angle is. But we do that all day long. So give us a call if you got a project that you need that for, and we can help you figure out just how big that angle would be, and if that would make sense for your application.
For sure.
So let's switch back over and let's check out kind of how we sell these parts. And we are literally in the process of working on doing a trim ring that it will be rectangular, right? That has a rectangular outside with a rectangular cutout so that it's self-service, you can buy online. We currently have one for a circle. So you can come in here and let me refresh so you can see what we got. Let's see, Chris responded. Awesome, thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate the kind words. So from the circle here, you're able to come in and select your thickness. So we've got quarter, half, 3/4, 1 inch, and like I alluded to, we do have 1.5 inches. It's crazy expensive, so just be prepared.
Yeah, make sure you're sitting down when you get that quote.
Exactly. So you select your thickness. Let's say 1/2 inch is fine. You type in your outside diameter of maybe I don't know, what do we say, 12 inches.
Yeah, sure.
That's a big one.
Maybe you're doing a 10-inch subwoofer ring.
And your hole diameter is 10 inches. Now, this is a totally acceptable size difference, but let's say you tried to put in 11.5 for the hole cutout. So in this case, I'm putting in my outside diameter and then specifying my hole cutout, right? My outside and then my hole cutout. We do have a pop-up that warns you this cutout is too large relative to the outside dimension. We require at least 1/2 inch of width of material for the outside edge. Please call for special orders. So we will certainly do, and we'll switch back over, we will do skinnier rings than 1/2 inch. So pretty much what we're saying is, for any of these, we're not going to go smaller than 1/2 inch on this material that we lead. Typically, we find that much less than that. One, you start to lose some structural integrity. Right, this thing starts to become a little bit flimsy, and two, you don't leave much material to screw into. So it's not really clear how you would even really use that besides maybe offsetting your screws or. So it's put in there as a little bit of a safety to you. If you know your specific application, you already have a plan and you need it, you need it to be 3/8 of an inch and there's a specific reason, give us a call and we can do that. But that is put in place to stop people from maybe making a mistake and not thinking it through all the way. So continuing on, we let you specify your color and your routed edge. Like Matt was saying, we do recommend putting a routed edge on it so that you go a little bit oversized and it looks nice and finished. And you get a price right there. And that's something that you can order right off the website. Of course, we're happy to brainstorm on anything with you. But if you're more of a self-service guy, it's here and it's ready to go. It's something that you could do on your own. What else did we miss? It's a lot about trim rings, but it's good stuff. We covered a lot of good stuff that someone would want to think about if they're replacing a speaker and want to make it work.
We talked a little bit about wedges. I mean, the wedges they're really convenient. I mean, you run into a lot of curved surfaces on boats, a lot of transoms. The ones that I think I've done the most for are transducers. If you're trying to mount the transducer to a curved transom, your transducer might be coming off the back of the boat at an angle, and you want to try and get it more in line with the direction the boat's going to be traveling, so you're not like dragging the transducer sideways through the water. Believe it or not, I've done more of those than any.
Do you ever pocket like this, or is it always just a straight angle across something?
Every boat's different. I can tell you, I have like a little 13-foot Boston Whaler, and my transom is rounded the way that it comes back, and I've got it close enough in the middle that it's fairly straight, but I really could use a wedge there to get that transducer in line with the direction the boat travels.
Because you'll get a little bit of flex, right? I mean, if you mechanically fasten this down, right?
You will, but over a short distance, you don't get much. It's like try to break a long pencil, but then try to break half of the pencil.
I'm trying to think of how, because I know we do a lot of the wedges that are this way, right? But if you had one that had to be pocketed like this, it seems like it's quite a bit more complicated, right? Okay, that's what I was asking. I don't know that I've seen us do much, if any, of that.
There is a part we make for a boat builder.
For sure.
That we do that for, and it is I think we had our engineer probably spent 2 days on that complex curve.
Well, the nice thing is when there's a complex curve for a boat builder, you're able to send them a sample, trial and error, 2-3 times, and then amortize that over a couple hundred or thousand production parts.
Exactly.
It's much more expensive to work in a capacity for a one-off.
One-off.
Yeah, it's almost cost prohibitive. But in some cases, maybe it's not required. Maybe there's a different place you can put it, and an angle in one direction would work. But this kind of stuff is what we do all day long. It's the stuff we talk about. If you have a specific requirement, something you're trying to accomplish, give us a call. I know I say it at the end of this. We get a team of people that are, sitting there waiting to chat with you about your boat project. You can see this is very much so core competency stuff we work on every day. So please don't hesitate to reach out. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments. We'll check them out and reply. But otherwise, I appreciate your time. Thanks and have a great day.